Yeah, it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Start by pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no minutes approved, and I have no president's comments. There's no one here from the public, so there's no public comments.
I want to make public comment.
All right.
So I wanted to be on record as saying that the reasonings for this meeting are inappropriate. There is no reason for us to be having this meeting at this time. The premise under which this meeting is held does not fall within the boundaries of the board's authority or involvement. And I want to go publicly stated that I am not in favor of this, have not been in favor of this, and advise my board colleagues that this is not a course of action we should be pursuing. However, here we are, and I just wanted to make it very clear that I am not in conjunction or in alignment with the purpose of this meeting.
Also, just a friendly suggestion, Doug, just so I capture this, what are the criteria for a closed meeting?
This isn't closed
This
meeting.
isn't a
This
closed
is not a
session.
closed meeting yet.
Okay, I'll hold my comment then.
And I'm going to comment, and I disagree with you.
What's new, Larry?
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm going to yeah.
I'm sorry, there's going to be one rule here, or I'm gonna get up and leave.
Camilla,
No one is going to be uncivil to the
I
other
mean, I'm
person.
going to respond to
I
Doug's
ask
comments,
for,
please.
I ask for respect.
Yeah.
I ask for gentlemanly, I don't have to say that, but I ask for gentlemanly behavior. We are not going to call names. We are not going to point fingers. We are not going to yell at each other. My blood pressure is high. I'm not going to do it. So either we do it that way or I leave. And I know nobody cares if I leave, but I will leave.
All right, so I'm going to address your comments. I disagree with you, Doug. 2 candidates have accused our election committee chairman and the committee of bias against them in favor of another candidate. And I disagree with you that this does fall within the purview of the board. The integrity of the elections is of the utmost importance. And we have 2 candidates questioning the integrity of the election. So the purpose of this meeting is to discuss whether or not the board should do anything, and if in fact we should, what we're going to do. Any other public comments?
I got one. So I'm obviously going to agree with Doug, not because I do it all the time, but because I see, first problem I have this issue, this is the first I've heard of why we're even having a meeting. I don't read Joe Reynolds' forum. I don't read Tom Stouse's progress. And I don't read the Get Involved Facebook page, but apparently this is where all these accusations have come about. And we get a meeting request from you saying, I'm having a meeting at this time. If you can't make it, I'm sorry. That's it. With obviously 4 candidates that agreed, or 4 board members that agreed on the time and the place. And 2 of them that had no idea even what the meeting was for. So I have a specific issue with the same thing has been going on now for quite some time, the non-involvement of all 7 members of the board. That's my first issue. My second is going into closed session without it being for an employee or for any kind of, or anything within the status of why we can go into closed session. The person who runs the election committee is not an employee. He gets no compensation from Ocean Pines. He's a volunteer on an election committee. And as far as I've heard, he doesn't want the board involved with this at all. He's perfectly fine. He can handle himself. He's been doing this for a long time, and he has no issue with this. So I want to know who's bringing up the issue, because it wasn't him. So if it's the board bringing up the issue because they think, and we're never going to control social media. That's just how it is. These guys can go on social media and say whatever they want. If it offends you, fine. Get up with an attorney and go after them. If they do say something that's lying, debate them. If you have an issue, talk to them or talk to whoever got offended by it. I don't think that we should get involved. You send them a note that's saying that this is going to be, that it looks like that they're involved in calling our our election committee biased and that it makes our election look not professional and like it's not good. Us having a closed meeting about the election makes us look like we're trying to influence the election. That's just what it does. I'm sorry. To have this 2 weeks before in public is ridiculous. And I don't agree with this for a second. Getting involved in the election process by the board is one of the worst things we can do. Period. And it just seems like a last ditch effort to me, and I'm disgusted with the whole thing. There's my public comment. You can answer me too.
I'm going to address that too. It's interesting that you're the only one that doesn't understand why we called this meeting. My email to the rest of the board specifically stated to address the fact that the election committee was accused of bias, and that's what we're going to address. Doug clearly understands it, and everyone else here understands why we're here.
Well, I understand now that I heard from Tom Stouse, and he told me why we were going to a meeting. But you, in your original email, stated had nothing to do with, didn't have anything at all. And I you know what? It's just all we're going to do is fight. It just doesn't make any sense. It really had there was no specifics. You said it didn't have any. It didn't do anything to tell me where and why. It was very vague and didn't say who it was against or what it was about. And I'd have to reach through and find it. I had it up here earlier, but I can't find it. But anyway, go ahead. We'll just finish.
Any more
this.
public comments?
Yes, I have one. Thank you.
I think we're moving into discussion of the topic itself.
Right.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Public comments.
As a public comment, I would just like to say here that I spent time on the phone with all members of the elections committee. I am the board liaison to this procedurally based committee. And the committee does not want the board involved in this. And yes, perhaps Colette, you're right, that is discussion. But I think I just need to put this out there that I have talked to Steve Havinger at length. I have talked to each member of the elections committee. They see themselves not as a board committee, but as a procedural committee that reports to the board on certain matters, but they have a specific purpose for which they're dealing. They believe, and I concur, that they want the election to be fair to the public. They are concerned about the public and having a community-based election. I think that we are overstepping our boundaries by getting involved, and I must advocate for the committee that I represent. And therefore, I think that we are completely out of line in bringing this to a board meeting today.
Any further public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close the floor to public comments. There's a motion to go into closed session. I'll read the motion. At a meeting of the Board of Directors of Ocean Pines Association Incorporated held on the 18th day of July at 2 p.m. in the Ocean City Boardroom, the board voted to adjourn to closed session for the purpose of discussion and consultation with legal counsel on legal matters as permitted by the Maryland Homeowners Association Act, Section 11B-111-4-3. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I want a discussion before we vote.
Absolutely.
Jeremy, there?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the deal on going under, you know what the subject matter is, and we don't have to get into subject matter. What's the deal on going into closed session?
So we're going into closed session to discuss with the board and me if the board can respond, and what would the legal implications of any proposed response be? Okay. The reason, so that's the legal reason to go into executive session. Okay. Because because we're dealing with an election here, any response, one way or the other, has legal implications as it impacts the election. Secondly, discussing this in public session would ultimately do the disservice to what we're trying to protect, which is the integrity of the election, and not the board weighing in on the integrity of the election. So those are the rationale to go into executive session to discuss this. I would be concerned if open statements were made that, if broadcasted out, could be used against to impugn the integrity of the election. So that's what I'm looking to avoid.
Doug?
Jeremy, from a legal perspective, how do we know that the integrity of the election is at risk here? What facts do we have? What information do we have? We as right now, I have nothing other than a sense that a comment has been made, and quite frankly, where is the legal ramification there? I mean, if we had a comment about or went into a closed session for every comment that was made negative to this board, we'd be in closed session meetings 7 days a week.
Agreed. It is not the comments that I'm concerned about as much as the potential responses to those comments.
So one of the solutions would be not to have a meeting at all.
That is, of course, the solution, yes.
Thank you.
Jeremy,
I'm sorry, Colette?
I disagree that we have a basis for assuming that we have legal ramifications right now. We have, we haven't really put out on the table exactly what we're going to be deciding here. And my understanding is that the decision is first, before we get into anything that has legal bearing, is there a basis for us to make a decision about responding or putting out some kind of a statement in support of the elections committee? And I don't see that puts us at any legal risk. Once we decide yes or no on that, maybe, if we decide yes, we're going to put a statement out, maybe we're moving into legal territory and we could go into closed session at that point. But I fail to appreciate that the decision about should we respond and do we have the authority to respond needs to be in closed session.
Cammie?
Jeremy, it's Cammie. I have to agree with Colette on that wholeheartedly. If we look at the homeowners section, four section Roman numeral 4, consultation with staff personnel, consultants, attorneys, or other persons in connection with pending legal matters. We have nothing pending before this board at this point. We have a what if and could be, but I see pending from a legal perspective as we've got something that's following court or we've been put on notice that there is going to be some action forthcoming. So I have to agree with Colette. I don't think we have what we need from that particular attribute. With all due respect to you, Jeremy, because I do respect you a lot. I agree with Colette. I don't think we have what it takes to reach the standard of being a pending legal action.
And there's another provision under the HOA Act that says consultation with legal counsel regarding legal matters. And that's the one I was referring to.
How do we know it's a legal matter?
Anything, if it's impacting the election and the veracity of and the validity of the election, that's arguably a legal matter. Because under the statute, under the Maryland Homeowners Association Act, any member of a community can challenge the election by filing a complaint with the Attorney General's office regarding, I think there's 8 different aspects of elections that can be challenged.
Colette?
Jeremy, I too would say that I respect your opinion, as always. However, we're not going to be discussing the validity of the election, to my knowledge. We're going to be discussing the appropriateness of the board putting out a statement in support of our elections committee and our elections process.
So if you do not want to go into executive session to discuss it, that is fine. It is not my choice. It is absolutely your decision to do that. So if you don't want to go into executive session, absolutely fine. What I would say is, in the discussion that it will be ongoing when it's an open session, please be very careful with what you say.
And will you be,
avoiding any names, avoiding making gross statements, making conclusory statements of intent, anything regarding that. Just stick to the basic, just stick to the facts.
Okay, and will you be staying on the call, Jeremy, to police us on that?
I will do my best. I have to hop off from 3 to 3:30 and then I'll come back because my son's calling me from camp. But other than that, yes.
Okay, thank
But
you.
yes, if you're going to discuss in an open session, then we just be very general with what you're saying about anyone involved. That would be my only comments.
Cammy?
Yes, thank you, Colette. I think you've hit the nail right on the head. And Jeremy, we do not have this on today's agenda for a public comment. Or I'm sorry, we do not have this on today's agenda. And if we vote not to, well, it's not on today's agenda, and I'll leave it at that.
So, Jeremy, I guess I need a little bit to understand your guidance a little bit more, okay? And let's speak in general terms. We have a public charge that the election committee has shown bias and has been unfair
Right.
in a broadly distributed media,
Yes.
okay? And given that situation, what are the parameters? First off, given that the election committee has been challenged as to what both the integrity of the election and their credibility, what is the basis to proceed and act on that under the HOA statutes as a board?
Well, there's no legal requirement or restriction in the board addressing that. So if, speaking generally, a complaint has been articulated publicly, not directly to the association, but that questions what the committee has done, right? That the committee is biased. And so that if somehow it does impute to the corporation that a committee of the corporation is showing favoritism towards one or two candidates. And if that is true, then obviously that impacts the election. Does the board have the ability to weigh in? The board does have the ability to weigh in if it chooses to do that. I'll certainly give my opinion when asked. But yes, the board has the power and the ability to do that because, again, while the committee is somewhat separate, it is a committee of the corporation, founded by the board, empowered by the board, working under the board.
Is it the responsibility of the committee or the responsibility of the board to ensure the public that the election is a fair, free election, free of any nefarious activity?
It is the responsibility of the board to ensure that the procedures that are in place and the people that are administering those procedures are operating consistent with their responsibilities and their directives of the procedures. With respect to the community, the board weighing in, or the corporation weighing in on what people are doing outside of our control, right? Then we do not have an obligation to step in that regard.
So from both a practical and a legal matter, okay, the response to the charges of bias should come from where, in your opinion?
From response, where they should come from, it should come from depending on what is said, right? And so my feeling is that the committee should make a statement on the subject matter unless the board believes that there is or has evaluated whether there is or is not bias.
Well, didn't we already release a committee report, a committee statement without knowledge of all the board members, obviously? But didn't we already release a committee statement from Steve about what happened and what he went through?
The board did not release a statement.
But
He
the
did that
committee
on
did.
his own.
No.
Well, Josh released it.
No.
because
He
came
did
through
it
Josh.
on his own, Tom.
But it came
We
through
knew-
Josh.
We knew nothing about it.
But it came, but it came through Josh, through the Ocean Pines Association
correct.
website and all of our social media. So he
Well, your
addressed it.
comment was that not all the board members knew. None of the board members knew.
Okay, I mean, well, great. At least we're all on the same page on something. But my question is doesn't this, just having the meeting period, when the committee has already acknowledged what they've done and how they went about it, and answered the questions of bias, doesn't our having a meeting as a board to make a decision on what we want to, why we should get involved or if we should get involved, isn't that showing bias toward the election already? I mean, at this point, it just seems like we're getting involved for no reason. It's already been answered and said, and it's all on social media. Why are we giving credence and heed to Joe Reynolds' forum is my question. I don't understand.
Well,
People can say anything they want. Period. About you
I'm gonna
or
respond
about
to that.
or about the election committee. I was asking Jeremy. I wasn't asking you. I was asking Jeremy. So I just feel that this, just having the meeting, it makes is a bad optics for the election. Period. I don't know if it makes any difference legally, but I just think it just shows us as trying to influence the election. That's just me.
I mean, if I had to speak honestly, do candidates in board elections and probably all elections lie all the time? Absolutely. There's always the same. These are a little bit. People lie. I'm not saying that these individuals are lying, but we hear all the time people making misstatements and accusations, and that happens all the time. That's not and so usually the corporations do not come out and address those during the election unless they're actually accusing the corporation of fraud or something of that nature. But I would generally want since you have a delegated election committee that is separate, to be able to respond to that. Those who I've spoken to, I've shared my sort of thought of during the last presidential election is the main spokespeople were the chairs of the various election commissions. And those are the ones who were speaking. And so that the politics stayed out of it and it stayed focused from the chair of the election commission who was responsible for doing that. They're not accusing the corporation of fraud at this point in time. They're accusing, of bias amongst the board, and they're accusing, more importantly, the bias of the election committee, that somehow the election committee is trying to rig the election. And so that would be the accusations to address.
So if you think about what has transpired, we have some comments on social media, okay? Comments are made all the time. Regardless of whether you agree or disagree with them, they're made all the time. I'd like to challenge us to differentiate between a comment versus a directive that has been created to elicit a specific response from the parties involved. We don't have that right now. We just have a comment.
No,
Right?
we have an allegation, Doug.
It's a comment.
It's an allegation.
We
two
do that
allegations.
all the time.
No. This is a little
Okay.
different, Doug. This is an allegation
no,
that
you're
there
making
is
it-
bias
You're making
amongst
an
the
allegation.
committee chair and the
I haven't
the
finished my
committee.
statement.
Guys, could we do this one at a time, please?
I was interrupted. I wasn't finished what I was saying. Okay? The idea here is it's just a comment. Treat it as such. Okay? Because somebody doesn't like something doesn't automatically necessitate an action on our part. It doesn't. Plain and simple. All right? Quite frankly, I believe the elections committee is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. All right? So I don't believe we should have anything to do with this whole point. Is the idea they made a comment and we're reacting to it. Well, we shouldn't be.
Well, and I disagree with you. This is not just a comment. They alleged that the chairman of the committee is biased, and they alleged the committee is biased. They made it publicly. I'm not so concerned about any comments that people make about me or the rest of the board, but this is about the two candidates alleging that there is bias on the part of the committee chair and the committee, and thereby there is bias in the election process. I don't care who the candidates are. I don't care. I'm not advocating that the board take a position on any of these candidates involved. I wish them all luck. But when candidates make accusations, and that's what they are, they're not just comments. They are accusations of bias. That takes it to a different level in my mind. And as a board, it should be the issue should be addressed to the community. Now, How we do that is another story. Whether or not we go out and make direct confrontation, whether or not we argue point for point, or whether we just affirm the statement put out by the chairman of the committee, that's all up for discussion. But I believe that these allegations are enough. And they, again, I'm going to repeat, they are not just comments, they are allegations that were made in public. And as a board, I believe we have an obligation to make sure that there is no doubt in the mind of the community that the process is not biased. That's what this is about. This is not about the two candidates that made the comments. This is about the fact that they made comments that are challenging the credibility of the committee and the process. That's the issue here. It's not about the candidates, it's about their comments challenging the process and the committee. Doug.
Let me ask you a question on that, in that regard. Then why, I would think protocol would dictate that the chairman of the committee would be the appropriate person to respond.
And my own opinion is he put a response out, but my opinion is, and everybody may disagree, my opinion is that these allegations are serious enough because it is questioning the validity of the election that is about to take place, that the board should comment one way or the other. How we comment, at this point, you know, I'm not looking for a fight with people, but I think that as a board, we have an obligation to not only ensure, but to counter any allegation that there is bias here. Colette?
My opinion is that as the executive body of this organization, we're responsible for the carrying out of the responsibilities by our committees, the two committees that operate independent of us, that are not advisory, the ARC and the Elections Committee. We are ultimately responsible for how they carry out their duties. And if there are allegations of problems with that, it is our obligation to respond. I think, you know, I certainly agree with the response that Steve Habecker already put out. I think it was well stated. I think it was thorough. I think it did the job. But I think as the executive body, you know, I would advocate for us just affirming, yes, indeed, our election process is independent. The board has faith in the integrity of the process and the committee, and that's it. You know, they deserve that level of support from the executive body. And I think that happened during the national elections, that the states,
Frank?
the secretaries of state put out the official comment, the governors affirmed.
Frank?
Okay, so I believe, look, nobody on the board of directors has not been, the charges are not that the board of directors of this company or this homeowners corporation have shown bias or that we've shown favoritism. The charges of bias and favoritism were made specifically against the committee, not against the board. Therefore, I believe the board should, and the only response to those charges so far has come from an individual, not from the committee. Is that correct?
It came from Steve Habecker, the
On
chairman.
behalf of the
On
committee.
behalf of the committee.
On behalf of the committee?
Yes.
And the whole committee has agreed to that,
The
correct?
whole committee has been contacted and agreed.
To that thing. Then I think that the public response to that should come from the committee. And the only obligation of the association and the board with regards to that is to make sure that that public response to those allegations of favoritism and bias be transmitted to as many of our 8,452 homeowners as possible, as soon as possible. So the committee can defend itself. It's an independent committee. The charges aren't against us. Our job is to make sure that it gets out there as fast. Their response gets to as many people in this association as fast as possible.
And
Is
didn't-
that a sound legal position or not, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's fine.
didn't-
Tammy was next. Okay, go ahead.
Frank, thank you. I think that you have encapsulated everything that I have heard in the last 2 days, including the comments of the committee. I would tell this board that I believe that is the most appropriate way to handle it. I think that Josh can prepare, I'm just making a suggestion. I'm not saying that this is what should be done. That Josh can prepare a press release in maybe perhaps talking about the election and ensuring that it is fair and that it is well monitored and that we have done all of that other stuff. And I again reiterate, taking a defensive posture would not be my position because that is not what this committee wants. But explaining the process and ensuring its integrity, as Frank has indicated, is very important.
Tom?
Haven't we, isn't it already been done? 3 days ago, Steve put out the press release through Josh. It's already been done. He answered every question apparently that has been raised by the candidates that accused him of bias. And it all went out to every social media homeowner that we have on our list. It's already been done. I don't
didn't
understand
know
why
that.
we have to do it again and why we have to get involved.
I'm
in
sorry.
it. Oh, no, I'm not
I
yelling
didn't
at
know
you.
that.
I'm just, yeah, that's what I said earlier.
All right.
That it's already, Steve released a statement. He's in charge of the election committee, been doing it for years. He has no issue with this and doesn't want the board involved. He released a thing. I saw it on Facebook. It said exactly what he did and how he did it and what he and every step that he took. That should be enough for us. I don't understand why we need to get involved and put our name on the bottom and send it out. I just don't get it. If that's what you want, it's done.
No, our name shouldn't be on it, Tom. That's not what I'm saying. I have a question for Josh. Where did your press release go to, Josh?
Social media, Facebook, Twitter, our website, an elections page on the website, as well as a news section. It was sent to all the local media, and it'll be on the e-blast on Monday. It goes to about 8,000 people.
So it's going to be on the e-blast, okay? To do that, okay?
Colette?
We haven't acted on a motion.
Well, this is discussion on.
Let's discuss
going
on
into
Okay,
closed session.
so, I think Frank, what you're suggesting makes a lot of sense. We have the power to have the release be published on the media that we have control over. We do not have the power to have it published in other media, the newspapers, anything that is not on television, whatever the other media are. And I think if we want to ensure that it will be published in, increase the likelihood, we can't make anybody publish anything, obviously.
Mhm.
I think it's newsworthy and it should be published. But we certainly can't force private media sources to do that. Maybe increasing the likelihood of that occurring would be for Steve to actually write a letter to the editors specifically of the print media that we're concerned about. I don't know that this is appropriate for television media, but I think certainly all the print media, we would want to increase the likelihood that it gets out there. There are a lot of people that don't look at social media, get their news from the newspaper still.
Can I
Right.
ask one question outside of our rules of engagement to the media?
Yeah, if you want me to suspend Robert's Rules of Order.
So hypothetically, okay, if we tell the committee chairman of the elections committee that he's under attack, not the board, it's his responsibility to defend himself and his committee, not the board's. And it's his responsibility to make sure that that is published to as many people as possible. Okay, from a media standpoint, how do we make that happen? Or make sure, how do we, if he wants to do that, what's the protocol for
You're
doing
asking
that?
me?
Yes.
I'm not coming. There you go.
I mean, I think the letter to the editor would be an obvious call, but I have no comments on observing the meeting. Frank, so.
Yeah. So I mean, because what the media does is the media's thing, and that's the question. And I think, look, I would be quite. I think we've done our job by telling Steve, and I mean, how do you say this? Okay, let's just say it this way. Steve, basically, you're the guy that's been accused of bias and favoritism in your committee. You're on your own to write your own defense. It's not the board's job to defend you. It's not your fight. But I'll tell you what, Steve, if you want to make sure, if you don't feel that the word is getting out effectively to the homeowners, then we should authorize Steve, if he wants to be able to spend what he needs to spend within, reason to make sure that gets out there. Because Steve can put his statement, if he feels that it's not getting proper attention in the media, he can put it in the media as a paid
Announcement.
announcement,
That's the other, yes.
okay? And Steve should be authorized to do that, and the board should have absolutely, and I address this to the liaison and to the board members, the board should have absolutely no comments towards Steve as to whether that is appropriate or not. That should be his decision and his decision alone.
Agreed.
Doug?
So, I think we're getting close to a reasonable solution here. Number one, again, and don't take this the wrong way. Our conversation really is kind of unnecessary. Steve already assessed the situation. He wrote a very straightforward response to the allegations. He didn't need our help. He took it upon him. He's a responsible and solid individual, and he's already done it. We're being redundant. Quite frankly, I think there was an absolute proper course of action. He dispelled any myths. He kept the process within the elections committee. Didn't involve anybody else. That's what a good chairperson does in this regard. So any action we take is quite frankly, in my opinion, is redundant and unnecessary. I think we've already got a solution, and that if anything comes up later on down the road, perhaps then we take another look at it. But quite frankly, I believe it's been addressed already, and that we really don't need to go any further with this.
What?
Kind of building on what Frank and Doug have said, I think we are pretty close to a good action here. I do believe that the committee deserves for us to give unanimous support for what Steve did do, and any future publication of his statement that he feels is in order. I think he and the committee deserve to know that we as a board, we're not, maybe aren't going to make a public statement of support, but I think a personal statement of support from the board to that committee for their professionalism and integrity with respect to the execution of the election process this time.
Tom?
Don't we do that at the end of every election? Every election, we have an issue with something. There's an issue with not being able to see voting a couple years ago. There's an issue of where the votes ended up at the mail sorting area a couple years after that. There's always, and at the end of the day, after the election is done, at the August meeting, we thank the election committee for the job that they did and give them our support of what's happened. I don't understand. Steve has put out his statement. I don't think we need to get involved in it. I think we're just going over the same thing. He doesn't need to put it out again. It's already been out. All we're doing is beating a dead horse at this point. I know that there are people that want this in publications all over the place because I've heard rumors, but I don't see why we need to even go any further. Steve answered the allegations. He's at the head of election committee, has been that for a long time, and has answered them before, and every board has had no issue with it. I just think that we just don't need to be going any further with this. We all agree that it's Steve's responsibility to answer any allegations against Steve. And he agrees with it too. He doesn't want the board to answer for him. So
Hey, Cliff, can I add to your point about a personal statement to Steve? Would you consider that this meeting and the way we've discussed it right now demonstrates that we do support Steve?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, so then I would, because I would agree with you.
At
That,
least
that
6
way,
out of 7.
he gets what he gets out of this is we're saying we believe his response was appropriate. I think that's enough to say that the board's behind you.
Yeah,
But I think we're also, some of us are saying that we would like a little bit more.
we'd like an attaboy.
Well,
You know, we would like it to be more broadly disseminated. You know, he's stuck with social media, and I think that I think it should, I agree with Frank, that
Yeah.
it should be more broadly publicized.
well, here's the,
Frank Brown.
I believe it needs to be much more socially put out there because I really didn't hear about it at all. I'm not on Facebook. I don't read any of rental stuff. I only heard what was sent in emails within this group. I didn't get it anywhere from outside. I don't go to the website. I don't do that kind of stuff. I play golf and I go fishing. But, I don't see that stuff.
Good for you, Frank.
I don't see that stuff. The only reason I knew anything was going on was watching emails going back and forth from you guys. So I think there's a whole lot of people. My neighbors don't even know who's running for the offices. I've asked them.
Yeah.
So there's a whole lot of people that don't know anything
Yeah.
about what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that as broadly as you can get
To your point.
information out
To your
there, you
point,
need to do it.
I suspect those same people don't know there's been allegations made about the
Yeah,
election.
exactly. Nobody even knows. So if we just let it go, nobody would know that.
It's good, man. It's
Well,
good.
Frank.
let it go.
Frank?
I mean, first off, as far as the support to Steve and everything like that, I believe that this meeting has accomplished that. To your point, Tom, I don't think we tell Steve a damn thing. I think what we tell Steve is this: you're the committee chair. The allegations are against you and your committee. Okay, it's your job to defend against it. And if you're not satisfied that that the defense has been and your committee has been broad enough, you're authorized to go out and do what you have to do to get it more broadly disseminated. End of story. Throw it entirely to him, 100% of him, with the agreement of every single one of us that we don't talk with him to influence his decision at all. It is solely his decision.
I
That's right.
totally agree, and Cammie said that that's already what Steve agreed to. He said, put a statement out, the committee agrees with his statement, it's already there. That's my point. Why we don't have to tell him, or not you have to tell him. Having this meeting publicly, we're telling him. You say we don't have to say a damn thing to Steve, but then right now saying it is saying a damn thing to Steve.
Well, no, but
So-
the only point you and I are in disagreement on, Tom, is it's up to him and him alone to determine whether or not the defense of his committee has been widely disseminated.
I would think there would
If
be
it is-
any committee.
If it is not widely disseminated,
Just come to us.
and he wants to go run an ad in the Bayside Gazette with his statement in
Come
it,
to it.
he is authorized to do it without any further board interaction.
Nah, I disagree with
No,
that.
you can't do
I
that.
think he comes to us. Okay? I'm not a fan of giving a community member free reign to do whatever unauthorized expenses. No.
Okay?
But to your point, I agree with you. He would, if Steve feels, and Steve's the only one that's going to be able to understand it, if he feels he hasn't reached enough people with that, with his position, he can come to us and say, I'd like to expand my reach. What can we do? Then we get involved.
How do we narrow
We're on
that
the same
down so
page.
that it's not an open floodgate, but that we're not the gate that determines whether or not it's disseminated at his satisfaction?
I think the answer to that is that we recommend to him that he sends letters to the editors of the local newspapers. And that will not cost any association dollars. And quite honestly, I from the very beginning of this thing, I've had concern about spending association dollars to address this issue. I believe the issue needs to be addressed, but spending money on it is another story. And I think the best approach is either for the board or for Steve to send letters to the local press and address the issue again with them. That would be my recommendation to Steve.
Under Steve's discretion.
Under Steve's.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm not giving him an order. I'm sorry, Jeremy?
Can I ask a question of Josh if he's in the room?
Yes, he's here.
Josh, if a letter of editor is sent in, will they generally publish it? Do they have editorial review to kick it, or will they generally publish what's sent in?
And everything is pretty much, in my experience with the Bayside Gazette, for example, they would publish anything they got unless it was offensive in some way or unpublishable.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're all on the same page. We're gonna take the vote on going to closed meeting. And
Is there any further discussion on going into closed session? All in favor of moving into closed session, say aye. All opposed? Motion fails.
And so we need to have a motion to tell
Adjourn.
Steve what we're gonna tell him.
Yeah, just have a motion to adjourn.
We made a decision.
Is the
Before
idea
we-
that we're recommending or we're supporting? And I don't mean to quibble with words. We support whatever he does or we're recommending that he does something.
No, we
We're
just
recommending-
support I think we just support what he does. Cammy can call Steve and say, Steve, if you want to go further, feel free, just let us know. Let the board know if you plan on writing a letter to the editor.
Yeah,
That's
we,
all.
we support if you do that.
Yes, that's it.
Done.
I mean,
That's
that's
fine.
it, done. Just
Don't
that
even think he
simple.
needs to let us know. If he wants to do it, just
Yeah,
let him
that's
know.
fine.
I'll let him know.
And if he feels that the letters aren't published and he wants to come back and do something else, come back to the board.
It's his ability to defend himself. If that's what he
And
wants to
he's
do, I would.
a stand-up guy.
The art
He'll
committee
know
will
what
do
to
so.
do.
Oh, yeah.
And
So our
exact-
decision is to authorize Cammy to communicate to Steve and the committee, our decision to do nothing and to, support what they decide to do further, if anything.
that
Yes.
we will do nothing at this
Right.
point.
Yeah.
And that if Steve feels that he should send a letter to the editors of the local press, we're fine with that. Because normally that's not acceptable.
Right.
Jeremy, if that were to happen, would you like to review that or would you?
I would like to just review it real quickly.
Okay.
I'll let him know that.
Are there any other comments?
Yes, thank you all very much. This was a very profitable meeting. It was one where we all came to consensus and agreed and disagreed about some things, but I am very, very pleased with the way this meeting turned out. And Frank, I know this really kind of started with you and I'm sorry that it did, but thank you for your involvement and kindness in helping us reach a solution.
Hey, look, here's my comment to that. Candidates are public figures. Jeremy said people lie about candidates, and it's candidates' jobs to defend themselves. Period. I've done that. I'm prepared to do it again, but the committee's job is to defend itself from any allegations made against it.
And the only exception to that would be is if we believe that the committee overstepped their line. It did something improper, which we do not believe, correct?
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Meeting's adjourned.